Disney theme park characters. Have there been situations where you had to break character? What was the reason? Consequences? I auditioned to be a face character in Disneyland and made it to the stage where they run through scenarios of unruly guests, rude comments, etc. And you have to respond and come up with responses in character. My dance teacher was a face more than 20 years ago and she had all kinds of stories of people trying to reach up her skirt. She was Pocahontas mainly. In the end I'm glad I didn't make it through. At the time it was like barely above minutes wage, which was like $6.75 an hour or something like that. I chaperoned a gentleman with special needs to Disneyland as part of a group tour. When our group of special needs individuals met the characters, they were all absolutely incredible with our people. Minnie flirted with my friend I took. Merida flirted with me. But the best of all was Cruella de Vil. Normally she insults whoever she takes pictures with. With us she managed to stay in character but not say anything actually mean. She said to one guy with a cane, "Ah, I like your cane. You can use it to beat little ones out of your way." Maybe someone who actually played Tarzan can confirm this for me. Disneyland used to have a Tarzan character, but you don't see him anymore. Since the characters are always expected to pose for photos and selfies, and Tarzan wore nothing but a loincloth, women were constantly grabbing the actor's butt when they got in close. So, the park just quit that character. Update. After some confirmation of the bad behavior, there are still recent Tarzan sightings. It appears Disney paused the character and redesigned his loincloth costume into one more like a pair of shorts and a jungle vine sash. Apparently, women are still grabby but the costume department tried to make it a little less easy. We saw Tarzan at the Animal Kingdom at DW a few years ago. I like his costume was kind of skimpy but definitely more than a loincloth. If they can't break character, does Rapunzel get to hit perverts with a frying pan? On a Disney cruise I met a guy who looked exactly like Peter Pan. When we asked him he said no, Peter Pan has brown eyes, or something like that. The next day when we went to get a picture with Peter he got super close and whispered, "See, Peter has brown eyes." Hands down best Disney employee I've ever met. He was also Pluto. The guy referencing he knows Peter Pan's eye color should be a dead giveaway. I hugged the snot out of Stitch a couple of years ago and I'm pretty sure that I heard a squeak. If you're reading this, friend of Stitch, I'm very sorry for hugging you so hard. Ex-cast member here. While not a character myself, I did have to work the parade route from time to time, making sure kids didn't dart out in front of floats and such. Friends of characters would often be playful with CMs along the parade route, winking, making silly faces, etc. There was one day where Baloo came up to me mid-dance and proceeded to bow to me. Baloo also happened to be wearing some sort of crown hat thing with a star on the top. Baloo probably wasn't aware of how tall that actually made them. Baloo managed to smack me right in the mouth with that star, cutting it open and giving me a fat lip. Fairly certain I heard Baloo audibly gasp when they stood upright again, paused to mouth, immediately stopped dancing, just stared at me as I bled. They tried to grab my hands and pull me to them, but their handler came and ushered them along. Oops. I watched Jack Sparrow talking to a kid when the kid started puking everywhere. He said too much of the ol' apple juice. I been there myself, even ran out once. All the while, the kid is just projectile vomiting everywhere. I just wanna say that there is a video on YouTube of some meathead trash talking Gaston about how he could beat him in a push-up match. They go at it, meathead gives up, and Gaston cranks out a few more one-handed push-ups just to rub it in. Talk about character. A bit late, but I did the college program at WDW. Never saw character break when I worked audience control for parades. Definitely saw a few fully costumed characters puke in their heads, and Prince Naveen once got heat exhaustion and managed to leave the parade route fully in character. Once the parade was over, we saw him in the back almost completely passed out. Typically the parade will just speed up to double time if a character actor is in distress. I was at Disneyland once and the sheriff of Nottingham was fake menacing a child. He reached out to touch the kid's balloon and for some reason it popped. The character actor was clearly stunned. A new balloon appeared less than 30 seconds later. Saw a recent video on YouTube of a Ray talking to this little girl and her dad had just started filming. Apparently the story the little girl was telling got Ray laughing so hard, she had to turn her face away and eventually got up and ran away because she couldn't stop laughing at whatever the little girl's story was. Super adorable. In the YouTube comments it is explained what she said. My daughter busted me out for giving her too many donuts and told Ray she threw up, then persisted to share how she can potty by herself. Right after sharing secrets of the force. Complete 180 in the conversation. That's kids for ya. I have a close friend who was Woody for a while at Disneyland. He said that one time the float caught on fire during a show and they had to play it off completely in character. They danced around it and had to quickly get it backstage to deal with the problem. He said they played it off well enough that no one seemed to notice there wasn't any panic. He said he had never seen an instance of anyone breaking character because everyone was very well trained and there's always at least 6 or so cameras that can see you at all times. I also one time offered an unopened water bottle to an employee when it was near 100 degrees and he said if anyone at Disney saw that, he would be fired. They can't take anything from guests. He also mentioned the cameras constantly watching both crew and patrons. Float caught on fire. They danced around it. Sounds like some sort of Disney-esque satanic ritual. I've seen articles that face characters can leave at any time if harassment is bad, using in-character excuses. Costume characters always have an attendant with them to control unruly guests. If you harass a costume character you deserve to be kicked out of Disney. My cousin used to do this when I was a kid. We'd always go try to find her on days we knew she was working. She mostly played Pooh Bear. She would never say out loud hi Nugatuck, but she would get very animated and jump around to give us hugs. Occasionally she'd still say things like I have a rumbly in my tummy. I thought I was the coolest kid cause I knew Pooh Bear. You were correct about that. Worked at the Disney store in late 87 and 88 in Orange County, CA. I think, at the time, it was like one of only a handful of stores open. The back of the store had a big screen, where we constantly played some Disney video. Every once in a while, the biggest, muscular, blackest, gayest dude would come in and kindly request we play anything Pooh related. He'd then proceed to prance around the store. He came in the evenings, towards closing, and sing the Tigger parts of either dialogue or any song. Turns out he was one of the Tiggers at Disneyland. Dude just loved being Tigger. I wasn't a character but was a cast member. I was walking from backstage into the park. If you've seen the transitions, they are S-shaped to keep people from peeking in. I was pushing a dolly handcart. The ones we used had 2 long supports sticking out from the end. As I was going though Winnie the Pooh was walking in from the other side. I hit him her square in the leg with it. Hearing Winnie the Pooh say frick was a pretty dang funny. A few days ago, me, my sister and her friend went to the new Galaxy's Edge area. My sister's friend was around 6 feet 1 inches and had never seen Star Wars. We were walking around and Chewbacca ran up to her. He was around her height and hugged her. Then he put his hand above his head, showing they were both tall. She was super embarrassed and while we were walking away, he did that fist pump thing. Since then we refer to her as Chewbacca's girlfriend. Seriously the cutest thing ever. What if Chewbacca was played by a female and was super excited to see a fellow talk female? I couldn't even get the zombies at Halloween Horror Nights to break character. Asked one where the restroom was and he flung his arms in the proper direction and grunted. Pretty hilarious. A few years ago at Halloween Horror Nights I had a brief chat with a chainsaw wielding maniac. He screamed. I screamed. I asked if he was having fun and he said heck yeah I love scaring people and off he went. I wasn't a character but worked closely with them as a photographer. Disney performers are trained to never break character for whatever reason. They have ways of signaling their character attendant that they are in distress, and it's generally up to the character attendant to avoid any weird or uncomfortable situations. As far as weird situations, they do get people that stalk them in the park. Like some people get in those lines multiple times to get a photo with a specific performer. The weird side of Disney fanatics are something else. Yep, I heard of one performer who had to get a restraining order after one of her fans got a full back tattoo of her. The tattoo was not of her in character. WDW character department at Magic Kingdom many years ago. I can't remember breaking character, but I do remember working the restaurant at the Contemporary for dinners. One time we had a Make-A-Wish kid as a guest and they were just the most awesome kid. And it was just heartbreaking to know why they were there. So our lead let us do a group hangout with the kid for something like an hour in costume, playing and running around and having fun. You could never play like that in the parks. You'd start a kid riot. No consequences. We just all hoped we made that little kid happy. Bonus fun fact. The goofy costume for the electric light parade was worn by a float driver. Because the driver was seated. No pants with that costume, just the glittery top and head and gloves. They do not break character. My best childhood friend is a face character. During the interviews they bring you through a ton of challenging scenarios like kids with lost parents, kids who act mean, etc. If you break character, there are 1000 other people of your exact height and hair color ready to play the character better than you. They even made her do an impression of a Disney character without speaking. She had to be able to just portray the essence of the character, and if they couldn't guess who she wrote down, her interview was over. They are incredibly serious about staying in character. Anytime something bad enough would happen that they should break character, their handler would just guide them away and handle it themselves. Bonus info, she isn't allowed to tell anyone who she plays, except family and friends, or post anything about work on social media for the entirety of her time at Disney, or else she will be fired. I don't work for Disney, but I work for Party Princess Productions that does Disney Day parties on the weekends. I was Darth Vader in Malibu for this kid's day. It was only him, which was rare, but we had fun. We played lightsaber hide and go seek, where when he finds me we duel. I had him practice the force on me, helping him focus and toss me to the wall. In the middle of all the fun, kid starts coughing. It's subtle at first, then gets worse. Gets to the point he's not breathing and he's not moving. I took off my helmet and was about to perform CPR when the mother came out with his inhaler. She told me he can't play anymore because he has bad asthma and it gets worse the more active he is. I put the helmet back on, played things off. We opened presents together and I left. To this day I hate that mother for watching me play with her kid, knowing his condition and not telling me a word until the poor kid nearly suffocated. I called my boss and told her that I need to know all medical conditions before the party right away from now on. I hope that kid had fun. I still feel horrible for almost killing him from teaching him the ways of the dark side. Wow, Anakin, you've come really far from killing younglings to actually caring for them. I'm proud of you. I wouldn't say break, but I was a lifeguard and I had to ban this kid from going down the water slide. Every single time I told him he had to be feet first, and every time he said okay, but he kept going head first, and it got to the point where the other kids saw him and were copying him. He left and cried to mom and dad, and I explained to mom and dad why. They left and cried to my coordinator, and my cord came back saying that wasn't very magical. I explained after several times of this kid not listening. Other kids were copying him. In any case, I got a stern talk to about being the nice lifeguard who explains why versus the mean lifeguard who just yells orders. Later that day that kid was running across the deck. Despite several requests not to, tripped and ate concrete. Don't hate me because I don't feel bad. I'm a lifeguard as well, and if someone told me that, I would ask why I'm even there if they don't want me to remove safety issues. Literally 90% of the job is telling little kids not to do crap that could hurt them. Whoa, they don't mess around with their silence, Valhalla. My neighbor, he died a couple of years ago, so I'm safe in telling this. Worked at Disney for years. One day he was stocking shelves in a gift shop and came around the corner and nearly ran into none other than Paul and Linda McCartney. Before he could stop himself, he loudly exclaimed, "Holy crap, it's the McCartneys." He immediately realized how big of a breach of Disney cast member etiquette he had committed and turned 12 shades of red, but before anything bad could happen, Paul and Linda just smiled and laughed and introduced themselves. Apparently they were wonderfully laid back about such things, and quite used to surprised reactions when people recognize them in public. He didn't get into any trouble. His boss saw the whole episode and thought it was hilarious, and I think they both signed a hat or something for him as they were checking out. They actually had him killed because you were going to have told this story in the future. A face performer broke character for my husband and I won't say which park. but we took a trip to Disney about 2 months after our infant son died. He was our first. Our entire nursery was Neverland Peter Pan themed. We always wanted to take him to Disney, have him meet Peter. Well, he couldn't. I got a memorial tattoo, an exact replica of my son's hospital ink handprint, and we got a picture of Peter Pan with the tattoo. We were alone with him and his handler. I tearfully explained the situation before asking him to pose with my arm. He took lots of photos with my tattoo and us, and afterward he hugged me tight, told me he was proud of me, and God bless us, and he was so sorry for our loss. It was amazing, emotional, and I'll never forget that Peter Pan was proud of me for finding the strength to keep on living. It honestly meant the world. I'm so glad he broke character. I'll always treasure those photos and that memory. One of the traditions for our college sorority back in the 80s was that the day after initiation, all the new members and their big sisters would go to Disneyland sporting their brand new letters to wear. One of the costume characters in the parade kept throwing gang signs or something at us and we were so confused. Turns out it was one of our sisters who had to work that day. She was trying to do our sorority's hand symbol, but with her hands in oversized furry gloves it didn't show up so well lol. Reminded me of dabbing Squidward. I once ran up to Donald Duck to give him a hug when I was a kid and he shoved me away pretty hard. Kinda hurt tbh. I would say this was out of character but Donald is actually kind of a dong. My wife was goofy for a semester in college. She accidentally ripped the feeding tube out of a Make-A-Wish kid in a wheelchair going in for a hug with poor visibility from the costume. Luckily all wandering costume characters have uniformed handlers to assist, but it's kind of hard to stay in character as Goofy after something like that. She felt terrible and was traumatized for weeks. The kid was fine, from that incident at least. It was a hassle to mitigate, but no medical damage resulted from it. I went once and a man was harassing Cinderella so she excused herself to the bathroom and ran to a security guard. When I was 6 or so, I went to Disney World with my mom and aunt and cousins. I really wanted Captain Hook's autograph, but per his character, he wasn't supposed to give it. I started crying over it, and my mom went and asked him again nicely, I hope, and told him that I was very upset over it. He signed my book, even though he wasn't supposed to, and I always thought that was neat. So, to Captain Hook from 1989 or so, if you're out there, thanks, and I hope you didn't get in trouble for that. They don't break character. If a nuke fell on Disney, they'd be ushering you into the bomb shelters as Aladdin or whatever. Big blast, nerve gas, show your fast puss. The type of people that play characters are very into it. If something comes up that needs to be addressed they will handle it in character. You've probably heard stories about characters helping kids find their parents. These days characters always have handlers nearby that have walkie-talkies. I'm reminded of Gaston and the push-ups. Dude was on point with that character. This reminds me of that story about the little girl and boy whose parents died that got VIP treatment for a day by a Disney park character. One of the most touching stories I've ever read. Stuck with me. I received word on my headset that there was an emergency at home. I immediately ran away from where I was as Donald Duck. Turns out mom called my boss, we weren't allowed to carry cell phones obviously, and told him what was wrong. PS my mom had stage 2 ovarian cancer but had it removed and is 4 years into remission. Obligatory not me but my best friend is a very popular face character and she's told me some hilarious stories. One time though when she nearly broke character was when she was doing a meet and greet thing. A young autistic boy came in who got very overexcited and yanked her wig off. They put hundreds of bobby pins in your hair to keep them on so you can imagine the pain and she had to restrain herself so hard to not scream out. She said the wig was hanging off her head and everyone in the room just froze. The little boy started crying hysterically and had to be rushed from the room. They ended up closing her room up so she could get fixed but she said it was a pretty crazy moment. Apparently the parents were so embarrassed they didn't even say anything to her and just bolted from the room with the boy. Visitant from last year here. On the Halloween night, I've seen 2 female employees working on the store, not characters though, clearly upset by some kind of superior order. The exact dialogue was, "Yeah, sometimes it gets hard. I know it does." But that attitude was unacceptable. I didn't resist, and I said, "I guess even in Disney working sometimes sucks." The first girl immediately stood up and smiled as bright as she could. "What do you mean? Working here is awesome every time." I couldn't help but feel that she was agreeing with me, but never breaking the happy land face. Awesome place. Blink if Mickey is behind you with a gun. I'm not a character, but here is my story of it kinda happening to me. The first week of January in 2018 my family went to Disney World, it being everyone's first time except for my wife, and we were in line for the meet and greet where Kilo was on one side and Chewbacca was on the other. When we got to our turn, I let my 2 children who were with me go up first just so they'd be okay with him and so I could get extra pictures on my cell phone. At the time I had a huge mustache that came out right at the corner of my mouth, but the hair could almost fall below my chin. Chewie saw me and got crazy excited. Might have been part of the show. He pointed to my mustache and brushed his face, then motioned like he was twisting his mustache hairs also. He really played it up, howling, thumbs up, the whole 9. When we posed for our Disney pic, he actually brushed my mustache with his hand and gave me an awesome hug. That was probably my most teary-eyed happy moment of our trip. Kids didn't understand why I was so joyous. I told them that me and Chewie bonded. Highly doubt this will ever get read, but I have a story of someone I know who used to do the mascot stuff at Disneyland. Back a couple years ago he had to dress up as Nick from Zootopia for his shift. Now the thing about this costume is that the tail is massive metal spring to help give the illusion that it can move on its own. With that out of the way, one day he was doing his rounds with his partner, Judy, and they had a bit of a troublemaker, 11ish boy, who was being a little rough and pulling on his tail. Keep in mind this tail is pretty heavy at around 40 pounds and is attached to his back pretty firmly, with no real proper field of vision other than the tunnel vision they get, no braking character, and no security nearby to stop to issue. He was in a bit of a pickle. Fortunately for Nick, the father of said troublemaker told him to stop and apologize. He did so with a sour disposition that gave the impression he really didn't care. After said apology, a young girl behind him goes, "Hey Nick," and without missing a beat he does a complete 180 attempting to hit the troublemaker with his tail. He gets purchase and smacks the kid with a good thud and knocks the kid on his butt. While he was giving attention to the little girl his mind was racing that he was gonna get fired for this little stunt. But luckily for him, the dad pulls through by laughing at his kid's misfortune, telling him something along the lines of, "You know you deserved that, right?" He had some other stories of some of the stupid stuff they would do, but for reals, they drill it hard in your head when you go to work them to not break character, period. My mom was a costumed character for a couple of years at Disneyland. She was very committed to keeping character, but there was one instance where she broke character. 2 teens jumped her when she was playing Piglet and started beating her. At first she just tried to block and defend herself, but at one point she knocked one of the boys to the ground and pinned him. Considering my mom's only 4 minutes and 10 seconds and was wearing 50 pounds of costume, I consider that fairly impressive. The other kid continued to assault her and I think she may have yelped or cried out because the kid she had pinned hurt her and said, "Oh crap, it's a chick," like, no crap, dumb fuck. Most of the shorter characters are women because, well, they're shorter. Cast members came to help her and the kids were banned from the park. My mom got in a lot of trouble for that too, though, because she broke character. She was suspended for a couple days. A friend of the family was in Tokyo Disney during a major earthquake. She was Ariel and she was suspended up in the air. The pulley broke during the quake and she was stuck. She couldn't break character till they all evacuated. Not a character, but a security guard. At Disney, security has a character too. Look intimidating, and we can be. We've got a ton of different passageways and some lovely cells we'll lock you up in if we need to. Well, this one day, there was a domestic case at the parks. The cops took dad away and I, from that point, was to escort mom and her little boy to their hotel room as they were worried that the dad would somehow sneak back into the property. They were very afraid. I was walking them and I hear the mother talking softly to her son. "You see, your mama's strong and we'll be just fine. The 2 of us, we're gonna have a great trip." See that lady, she gestures to me. See, she's a girl too and look how tough she is. I bet they gave us the toughest guard around. Well, later, I got called again when they were ready to go to the parks, as they were still paranoid that dad would come back. I was walking them and the little boy looks up at me and says, "Miss, I'm scared. Are you sure we're going to be okay?" And I stopped, knelt down to his level, and said, "You're going to be just fine. Your mommy's really tough," and she was right. I'm tough too. And best of all, my best friend, Mickey Mouse, made sure to tell all the strongest, toughest people in the park to protect you today. He put extra magic to make sure you two have a great day, so don't worry, just have a fun. Double quote. He brightened up and gave me a hug, and it was the first time I almost cried on the job. I was at Disneyland a couple weeks ago and saw Darth Vader not cutting down younglings. It was just unprofessional as all heck. The effort they put into it just isn't the same anymore. Not a character but worked there. Disney has a hierarchy of what's important in a guest interaction, symbolized by the acronym SCSE, which stands for safety, courtesy, show, efficiency. Safety first, obviously, and next is to be kind and courteous to everyone. After that, protect the magic, the show aspect of Disney by doing things like not walking through one land wearing another land's costume, or referring to Mickey as a real person instead of an employee in a costume, by saying things like Mickey's taking a break and not Fred's on lunch right now but he'll come out as Mickey in 15 minutes. And efficiency, which is basically another word for working hard. One time during the Buzz Lightyear show at the Tomorrowland Terrace, called Club Buzz at the time, a kid came up to the counter crying because Zurg was beating Buzz, put him to sleep using a weird device on his back, and so the kid was really worried. The mom wanted us to just tell him it's fake. We did, though thinking back on it, we could have said something show why, like just keep watching. I bet Buzz will break out of his spell any minute now. But the kid was crying, so me and the other cast member just told him what the mom wanted us to say. No consequences because the boss wasn't around. It's really unlikely that you'll get any current cast members to answer. Also, there's no need for them to break character since they have handlers or security nearby if there is a safety concern or emergency. They also have tons of places to get out of sight to have a private moment. So, story time. I have 3 cousins who have been Disney princesses, 2 of which are still at it. About a year ago, my grandparents decided to go visit one of my cousins out at Disneyland Tokyo. My grandpa has relatively advanced Alzheimer's, but he is generally easy to handle. Anyway, somehow he got separated from my grandma and started to panic a little, looking for anyone he knew. Turns out the first person he found that he recognized was my cousin in full Cinderella character. They allow the characters to come out and walk around the park in Tokyo because the Japanese are super respectful. He started to talk to my cousin, calling her by her real name and quite directly asking her where his wife her parents were. He started to get pretty angry and frustrated when she wouldn't give him a straight answer. She kept character as best she could, but her handlers whisked her away pretty rapidly. He was reunited with the rest of the group soon after, but it was quite the scene. Additional note edit. Yes, it was tragic. Disney should show a little more leniency. My extended family just tries to remember it as a ridiculous chain of events and not as a traumatic one. It ended up being relatively okay in the end. Alzheimer's is a crappy disease, and I guess we think that it's still better to include my grandpa in family events and risk these kinds of happenings than to lock him up in some room somewhere where he would be completely safe. I wasn't actually there, so I'm sure I'm missing some details. Wasn't expecting this to get as popular as it did. That's gotta be awful to have to keep in character for that. You have been visited by the party pug. He just wants you to celebrate with him. Comment woohoo to celebrate with the party pug. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.